Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1 of my new podcast, What's Tom Reading? I'm Tom, and this week's book is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Because this is the first episode of this new podcast, I just wanted to give a quick intro to the format that I'm going for here. The primary focus of every episode is going to be reviewing a book that I've read during the previous week. Each show will also contain breaks and intermission, if you will, to visit I'm going to call it the random corner, where I talk about something random and enjoyable, the news corner, where I talk about some kind of fascinating current event, and the learning corner, where I talk about something interesting that I learned about during the week. So the basic format will go something like this. Hi, I'm Tom. This week I'm talking about blah, blah, blah. Roll the title music. I'll introduce the book, the author, and any relevant background information. I'll talk about a little bit, what I liked about the book. And as a general rule, I will avoid major spoilers for all fiction books, and I'll try not to squeeze all of the juicy parts out of the nonfiction ones in my review as well, so that it's still worth it for you to go out and read these books. Hopefully, by the time I'm done with an episode, you'll want to pick up the book or avoid it, depending on as the case may be. But I'm gonna overall get pretty down and dirty with these reviews so that you can get, I guess, a worthwhile picture of what's going on in them. So, after all of the good stuff that I talk about, we'll take our interlude. We'll go and visit the various diversionary corners. Then when we're done, I'll launch into what I disliked about the book, what I thought could have been done better. Though I will warn you in advance, I tend to pick books that I mostly like, and I tend to like most everything that I read. So this section probably isn't going to be all that fierce, but at the end, I will give the book a final review where I'll provide a rating using a basic 1 to 5 star system. Then I'll finish up with a quick parting thought of something wholesome, wise, inspirational, or whatever, and then get out of there. And all in all, the whole thing shouldn't take more than 45 minutes or so. And I hope it will be a blast. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast, giving it a shot. It really means a lot. And without further ado, let's get started. All right. I hope you like that little title music there, because I made it. And all of the little musical snippets that you'll hear throughout here are just me tinkering on the computer. And so I get a kick out of it. I guess I must have caught like a wild marching band hair there and tried to write something there. It's not the coolest, but I like it. So I hope you do too. All right, let's jump into the book. So this week I am talking about Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and it is almost certainly the most famous Crichton book, and one that you are, probably at least a little bit familiar with if you aren't actively living under a rock right now. Perhaps most notably, this book was transformed by Steven Spielberg into one of the greatest movies of all time. My wife and I watched this movie pretty recently, actually, and I've got to say that, even though it's closing in on 30 years since this movie was made, it still totally holds up. The dinosaurs are, just terrifyingly lifelike. And if I'm honest, that movie has basically shaped the entire way that I think about dinosaurs. I guess some scientists think that they might have had feathers, and I think that the consensus is kind of growing on that front. But I personally find that unacceptable and will not change my opinion on that, no matter what the evidence. T-Rex will always be a giant smooth-skinned death lizard in my heart, and velociraptors will always be smaller, smooth-skinned death lizards. And there's nothing that anyone can say to change that in my mind. They're dead anyways, so I get to decide. Me and Steven Spielberg get to decide what they look like. So the book, Jurassic Park, was written in 1990, and it is definitely in the science fiction category of books. It's not like space sci-fi like a lot of modern sci-fi is, but it's definitely in that zone. It's got kind of, I guess you could call it an Icarus motif to it, where Crichton talks about man flying too close to the sun with genetic engineering and falling hard. I love it. The main characters in the book are the same ones that you would be familiar with from the movie if you have watched it. And if you haven't watched it, then stop what you're doing right now and go watch that movie. you have to see it. I think it's a requirement actually for you to be able to be a human being. So, but yeah, all the main characters carry over from the book into the movie with some notable exceptions. Some of which I liked and some of which I didn't like. For example, so the kids are completely different in the books than in the movies. And I'm actually going to save that for later on to talk about in the stuff that I didn't like section, because I think that's one area where the movie definitely did a better job. And so first of all, I should say, right, as I'm reviewing books that have been turned into movies, I am not a purist or a snob over here. I'm perfectly happy to let an excellent movie be an excellent movie and an excellent book be an excellent book and not compare them to each other. However, in this particular case, I have to say that Crichton and Spielberg made my job of remaining neutral on this extremely easy, because you have to have both the book and the movie in order to get the maximum experience out of this story. Part of the reason that the book ports so well over to the big screen is that Crichton was actually big into screenwriting and movie making. So the man knows how to tell a story that will look great on the big screen. So basically the book and the movie end up being supplemental to each other in a really cool and dynamic way. And I recommend both. In fact, I would even recommend, and this might be controversial, but I recommend that you see the movie first, so that when you're reading the book, the imagery that comes to you can be ported over from Spielberg's fantastic adaptation, and you can get just a really it ends up being like an extra behind the scenes super cool story supplemental to the movie, and then the book stands alone in its own right, definitely. Since I'm talking about the things that I liked in the book, I have to say that Crichton is a masterful storyteller, and this is one of my very favorite books of his. I've read a few, you should too, but one of the things that Crichton really does is he sets the scene perfectly. You really feel like you are right there in the story with the main characters. You can feel yourself like bouncing around in the helicopter across from Dr. Grant as the pilot struggles to keep things steady in that strong updraft that's blowing up from the cliff face. You hear the rush of the waterfall and all the cries of the exotic birds as the chopper, descends through this paradisical jungle environment, and you're right there with the characters when the first dinosaurs show up on the scene, and you're just in awe of them, just like the characters in the story are. And you can almost, while you're reading the book, you can almost see that wide angle shot of the Brontosaurus in the Jurassic Park movies. And it's just beautiful. And the book does a great job of describing it as well. And so, like I said, this is one place where having seen the movie was super beneficial, because you know what the main characters are looking at, and you're right there with them, seeing it yourself as you're reading the book. It's a beautiful experience. As with all books, the characters are far more rich in the book than the movie, but that's, because print is just a superior medium for character development. Even the most talented director can't give you the thousands of words of painstaking character development that goes into a great book. The authors definitely have the advantage over the directors there. One character, though, I actually prefer in the book versus the movie, definitely, is the eccentric gazillionaire John Hammond. In the movies, he has like this kindly old man sort of vibe, and he obviously just really loves his grandkids and wants to make a wonderful park. In the books, though, he's this cold, calculating swindler, kind of hyper capitalist investor guy who's pitching all the time and trying to get people on board with this investment that he knows is kind of shady and isn't working out very well. And so he cuts all these corners to get this park delivered in time, just so that he can keep all of his investors happy. And basically he ends up bringing the cast of characters to the island as kind of like this last Hail Mary to keep the project alive and get all of like the lawyers and investors off of his back. Oh, and as a quick aside, I don't know which lawyer hurt Steven Spielberg, but his portrayal of the attorney, Donald Gennaro, that's like creatively malicious. Like, he must hate lawyers. In the book, Gennaro, the lawyer, He's like one of the strongest, bravest, most moral characters. He's hesitant at different times, right? But he always does the right thing. He's actually someone that I rooted for. And that's not just because I'm a law student either. And I realized that I made it almost halfway through this podcast without mentioning that I'm a law student. I am actually, just so you know. But yeah, so I guess maybe I'm a little prejudiced towards rooting for the lawyer types in stories, but not always. I mean, I can definitely see I can see what people are talking about in large degree when it comes to lawyers. But Gennaro, he's this genuinely good dude. And he's also, jacked, super fit and super cool, really nice to the kids. In the movies, though, he's like this sniveling whiner, and he's like, we're going to make a ton of money. Like all of his gross lines from the movie are ported actually over from the Hammond character in the books, where he talks about we'll have a special day for the poor kids to come, but mostly it's for rich kids, all this like classical, bad guy trope lawyer stuff. So yeah, like he's this sniveling coward until he like abandons the children to the T-Rex in the rain and runs away screaming. And then like a few minutes later, the T-Rex breaks down the walls of the bathroom where he's cowering and then eats him on the toilet while he screams girlishly. So I'm guessing due to the subtlety of the way that he was killed, that Spielberg just isn't a fan of lawyers. But hey, not that many people are. I get it. So in fact, let's do our first diversion here and get a quick lawyer joke going. And I found one that is kind of apropos to the science-y theme of the Crichton story. So so at a convention of biological scientists, one reacher remarks to another, "Did you know that in our lab we have switched from mice to lawyers for our experiments?" "Really?" the other replied. "Why did you switch?" "Well, for 3 reasons," responds the original scientist. "First, we found that lawyers are far more plentiful. Second, the lab assistants don't get so attached to them. And third, there are some things even a rat won't do." There you have it. I paused for laughter. I assume that you were laughing a lot. I know I had to delete all of my laughter. Anyways, classic lawyer joke. Back to the book. So basically, Crichton, the theme of the story is he's casting this critical eye on man's tendency to strive for greater and greater scientific heights, even at the potential cost of unleashing disaster upon the world. And that's the classic Ian Malcolm quote from the story, where he's like, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could that they never stopped to think about whether they should. And that's my impeccable Jeff Goldblum impression. I'm sure you were all transported there to it's like Jeff Goldblum was in the room just now. But yeah, so certainly like the scientists accidentally destroying the world, that's something that probably resonated more with the audience of 30 years ago than today. Probably. I still think it's cool, but I can't really imagine the modern risk averse scientists engaging in such a like reckless charge towards innovation like that, since most institutions these days make their scientists fill out forms before they use the bathroom. So, but back in those days, that was the Wild West of technology, and apparently there was a lot of concern about the reckless use of genetic engineering technology. It's not the most subtle metaphor in the world. The whole mess with nature and get destroyed thing, but what it lacks in subtlety, it makes up with potency big time, right? Like, mess with nature, get eaten by a giant death lizard. It's this classic man creates the monster that destroys him story. And I think it's one of the best versions of that story ever told. And basically, so all told, I just loved every bit of this book. You have to get it. It's a classic. Get it, read it. That's what I loved about the book. And now it's time for our interludes. So first things first, we're going to head over to the news corner. Did that little sound bite there sound newsy? I pictured it sounding kind of newsy when I made it. So anyways, yeah, that's my news corner sound bite. So Welcome to today's news. Today's top story comes from beautiful Pocatello, Idaho, where the sun is always shining, the birds are always singing, and the smell of freshly cooked meth is always on the breeze. Residents of Pocatello began to notice a foul odor emanating from a local funeral home, and it didn't take a ton of imagination for them to start getting concerned about what that smell might be. After the police were brought in to investigate, they discovered the decomposing remains of 12 adults, as well as over 50 preserved human fetuses. In the days since the discovery, most of the bodies have been identified, and the fetuses have been traced back to nearby Idaho State University, where the labs there say they sent the fetuses to the funeral home to be cremated and destroyed. As of today, criminal charges have been filed, but Pocatello police are playing this one very, very close to the chest. So far, no arrests have been made, so it's unlikely that there was any felony-grade foul play going on at the funeral home. But being not hideously creepy is one of the first and main jobs of a funeral home, so naturally, the local community is outraged and eagerly awaiting answers to all of their questions. Of course, the funeral home is not currently operational. They have lost their license, and the investigation into possible criminal charges is ongoing. Thank you for listening to today's news story. Let's head on over to the Learning Corner. I am not sure why I chose such ominous sounding music for the Learning Corner soundbite, but maybe I'll change that somewhere down the line. We're going with it for now. Anyways, for this episode, I decided to keep on theme in the Learning Corner with dinosaurs. And I feel like we all have, largely thanks to Crichton and Spielberg, a pretty solid conception of what we think T-Rex probably looked like. I mentioned smooth-skinned death lizard earlier, and that feels about right. Maybe I should say giant, big as a house, massive head, crushing jaws, giant exposed fangs and teeth. That's probably what you're thinking of when you think of T-Rex. And maybe T-Rex had some feathers on it or something. The jury is still out on that. It's scientists versus me on the feathers thing. But I bet you never thought about this. Some scientists, absolutely determined to ruin everyone's childhood, now think that T-Rex might have had lips. And when I heard this, I had what I assume you also have had just now, in a deep and visceral reaction that immediately rejected the image. But their evidence is actually fairly compelling. So if you ever get the chance to go and see a T-Rex skull or a large, similar carnivore skull, you look down right near its teeth, right where they attach to the rest of the skull. And all along the bone right there, near where the teeth attach, you'll see lots of tiny little holes. These are foramen, where nerves and blood vessels passed through the bone to supply the upper levels of skin and muscle kind of up above the bone. And as it happens, T-Rex has just a lot of these foramen. And in modern crocodiles and alligators, there aren't very many foramen supplying that area because they don't have lips. Animals that do have lips, though, tend to have a lot more foramen. So the basic conclusion is that the dreaded, deadly Tyrannosaurus Rex, that thing that's on your lunchbox and your T-shirt and that you were just so into as a kid, if you were anything like me, that T-Rex had lips. Kind of like how a dog has jowls that cover its teeth. And I'm sorry if this has ruined your day. Let's head on over to the random corner and clear out our palate. All right, I actually really love the random corner music. That one I'm for sure keeping. So, welcome to the Random Corner. This week, I want to talk about Michael Crichton, the man himself, because I think he's cool. And obviously, I've been talking about one of his great books. And typically, in most episodes, I would want to talk about something completely off topic in the Random Corner, thus the random. But in this case, I just can't miss the opportunity to talk about Crichton because he's such an interesting character. Did you know that the man was 6 feet 9 inches tall? that's tall. I don't know why I find that so fascinating, but I do. I guess I just don't picture him sitting there writing Jurassic Park, but like as a really, really tall guy, and actually like a pretty good looking guy too, like kind of like has this movie star vibe. So yeah, like he's like this really tall, attractive celebrity guy, looks like Hollywood elite, but also before he decided to be a world famous best-selling author, screenwriter, superstar, he thought it would be best to hedge his bets a little bit. And as a backup plan for his writing, he went to Harvard Medical School and graduated with an MD, which I assume was difficult. Yeah, but he never practiced any medicine. But, you know, imagine carrying something like that around in your back pocket is like kind of your safety thing. Like, this is a man, a great big, tall, handsome guy who wrote like just a bunch of best-selling novels, had this amazing career. And just as a backup plan, he went to Harvard Medical School. So amazing. He was super big into screenwriting. He wrote his novels in order to be friendly to the big screen, just as we've discussed. And he died tragically young at the age of 66 from lymphoma, no doubt with a lot of books still unwritten and stories untold. And that, in a lot of ways, is kind of the saddest part for me. So what a guy. And on that note, let's head back to the main review. Okay, and now it falls to discuss the things that I did not like so much about Jurassic Park. And this feels really hair-splitting to me because obviously Crichton is one of the all-time great authors. And what business does a lowly peasant like me have in criticizing any of his work? But there were a few things that kind of stood out to me. And I mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about the kids in his version of the story. So in the book, there's a brother and a sister. The brother is much older, the sister is younger, and the brother is both of the movie characters combined into one good character, and the sister is this useless, shrill, stupid, like her stupidity basically drives a lot of the plot points forward in the book. And it's really, really irritating to me. I really don't like when authors have one character just be like kind of like the bumbling moron, really, really easy to dislike character. It just seems like a little bit cheap to me, to be honest. So yeah, like the brother, he's like this dynamic character. He really, really loves dinosaurs. And he's also like a computer hacker from the 90s, you know, back when being a computer hacker was super cool. So he's like this hacker kid, and he's super into dinosaurs, and he really is into Dr. Grant, and like they have this great cool relationship. And the little sister likes to throw a baseball around with the lawyer and basically complain and whine the whole time. And all of her bumbling actions lead to people getting killed by dinosaurs. Spoiler alert, in the book, people also get killed by dinosaurs, just like in the movies, although different people. And I'm not going to tell you who, because I want you to go out and read the book. The deaths in the book, I think, are a lot cooler than the deaths in the movie. But I'm going to leave it to you to go out and pick up the book, because it's definitely worth getting. So yeah, the little sister, she'll be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then like leave doors open for the Velociraptors to get in, or like just dumb stuff like that. She's really, really, really an irritating character. And you find yourself just kind of wanting to punt her throughout. And I don't think that's very realistic to have just such a one-dimensional, whiny, useless character. Also, and this is barely even a criticism, right? Because the main focus of the book is kind of this man versus nature kind of thing, right? Where like man has unleashed, he's tampered with nature, and he's unleashed the forces of a vengeful Gaia, the goddess of nature, or whatever, however you want to like, you know, put this in like, you know, old Greek storytelling terms. Man has tampered with nature. Nature is getting its revenge in the form of giant death lizards consuming them alive. But the man versus man elements in this book are just weak. And I read The Lost World, which is the sequel to this, and the movie is also a sequel to the Jurassic Park movie. I read The Lost World. Incidentally, I think the Lost World book is actually a lot better than the Lost World movie, but they diverge in story quite a bit more. The Jurassic Park book and the Jurassic Park movie they stay pretty faithful to each other throughout. The Lost World movie is a totally different thing, and it's awesome in its own right. I love the movie, and the book is a totally unique thing, and it's awesome in its own right too. So they diverge a little bit more. I like the book better in that case. So maybe I guess I am a little bit of a purist snob that way, but anyways, in the second book, as well as the first book, there is this other kind of main bad guy in the background distance, who is this head researcher for a rival company, and he's just like almost comically evil. He's like this mustache twirling villain. Just really, there's nothing motive wise that resembles like any human being that I've ever met or heard of in the real world. It's just kind of that super basic vanilla bad guy, just like basically just drag and drop any evil bad guy from any story and put him in there and have him trying to steal dinosaur embryos, and you've got this guy, right? So it's not the best when it comes to man versus man conflict there. However, it does do a pretty good job of exploring kind of like ethical gray areas in business and things like that. So, where I think it kind of falls down, he also definitely picks himself up and does a pretty good job of it. One thing that I think might have been improved in the book is and this is actually a strength as well. So, like I said, you really have to like split hairs to criticize Crichton's writing, because he's one of the all-time greats. But I feel like if he would have taken more time with the book to dig a little deeper into character development, he was so concerned with making a product that's going to port so well to the big screen that he doesn't take full advantage, I don't think, of what he could have done with those characters had he just really focused in on what the print medium does best, and that's digging deep into character development and really getting in and getting his hands dirty with these characters and letting us as the reader experience that as well, so that you don't end up being super attached to any of the characters. You just kind of are along for this wild ride with them. You don't really feel like you know them all that well, and you can't really dig deep into their motives. You're just on this wild kind of crazy dinosaur ride with them through Jurassic Park, which is awesome. And visually, and when I say visually, I mean both from the movie standpoint and like my own imagination as I'm reading this book. It's visually stunning. The setting is amazing. The characters are amazing. The dinosaurs are amazing. Crichton, he writes so well in action, right? Like as the characters are moving and as the dinosaurs are moving in relation to them, the tension, you can really feel that he's just got an eye for building tension, but the characters just aren't there underneath the way that I've seen other authors be able to pull it off. So if I have to criticize this book, that's where I'm going to do it. The characters are just not as fleshed out as they might have been had he focused more on that. So without further ado, it is time, now that you've heard the good of the book and the not so good of the book, even though it's a great book, it's time for me to give my official review using my 5-star system. And in this case, I'm going to use bells to indicate stars, since this is a non-visual medium that we're going with here. And here we go. That's right, everybody. Jurassic Park is a 5-star book. I think that should have gone without saying. This is the first episode, so I wanted to do one that is definitely for sure a 5-star book, so that you could see kind of the concept of this. I won't always be doing such, upfront mainstream books, although if that's what I'm reading, that's what I'll review. A lot of what I end up reviewing typically tends to be nonfiction. I'm at business school right now, as well as law school, and so like books on marketing, books on leadership, books on law, books on, different nonfiction topics, as well as my standard array of fiction books, which I like to read in between. So I typically consume books about as quickly as I possibly can, and I want you to be able to get some of the benefit of that, particularly if I'm reading a more obscure title. I know Jurassic Park is one of the big ones, but maybe I will bring a book on here that you basically had no chance of finding on your own, but might be super beneficial to you, and it might be an opportunity for you to find some gems, and for me to this really helps me as well, because it keeps me accountable to the books that I'm reading and allows me to basically do like an extended book report on them. And it helps me to remember what I've learned. And so I hope this has been useful to you. It's certainly been a lot of fun for me. I'm going to keep this coming. But for now, it's time to wrap up the show. We're going to run a little short on this one just because it's kind of a concept episode. But I wanted to end with kind of an inspirational or motivational, or on every episode just have a thought that you can kind of carry with you throughout your day, something to think about, something to chew on, something that I found impactful in my travels or whatever. And this one, because I'm going full Jurassic Park, I went Jurassic Park on everything except for the news, because there are no dinosaurs, unfortunately, to talk about in the news. But I went full Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton, all the way through, all of the diversions even. I'm going to stay Jurassic Park on the outro, on the parting thought, which is a play on parting shot, but it's parting thought. Get it? It's cool. All right. This comes from the end of The Lost World, which is the second book. And there's kind of a spoiler here. Not a super big spoiler, because you find out that Dr. Thorne is alive at the end of the story, and that Kelly is alive at the end of the story. So that's it. That's the only spoilers. Okay. So just the tiniest amount of setup for this. They have just finished this ordeal, which you should definitely read about, this tremendous ordeal. They're escaping now on a boat, and a couple of the other survivors are debating and making up theories and really trying to, get their scientific hooks into what just happened and what is happening. And Kelly, she kind of shakes her head and sighs a little bit, and she walks up to the front of the boat, or to the helm of the boat, I guess, where Dr. Thorne is driving. And as she approaches, this exchange begins. And I think it's one of the finest things I've read in literature. You may agree or disagree. I don't necessarily agree 100%, but I think it's such a beautiful statement. And so here we go. So Kelly walks up to Dr. Thorne and he says, "Are you listening to all of that? I wouldn't take any of it too seriously. It's just theories. Human beings can't help making them. But the fact is that theories are just fantasies, and they change. When America was a new country, people believed in something called phlogiston. You know what that is? No? Well, it doesn't matter, because it wasn't real anyway. They also believed that 4 humors controlled behavior, and they believed that the Earth was only a few thousand years old. Now, we believe that the Earth is 4 billion years old, and we believe in photons and electrons, and we think human behavior is controlled by things like ego and self-esteem. We think those beliefs are more scientific and better. Aren't they?" Kelly asked. Thorne shrugged. "They're still just fantasies. They're not real. Have you ever seen a self-esteem? Can you bring me one on a plate? How about a photon? Can you bring me one of those?" Kelly shook her head. "No, but, and you never will, because those things don't exist, no matter how seriously people take them," Thorne said. 100 years from now, people will look back at us and laugh. They'll say, "You know what people used to believe? They believed in photons and electrons. Can you imagine anything so silly?" They'll have a good laugh, because by then there will be newer and better fantasies. Thorne shook his head. "And meanwhile, you feel the way the boat moves? That's the sea. That's real. You smell the salt in the air. You feel the sunlight on your skin. That's all real. You see all of us together? That's real. Life is wonderful. It's a gift to be alive, to see the sun and breathe the air, and there isn't really anything else. Now look at that compass and tell me where south is. It's time for us all to go home. And I just thought, after I read that, I had to stop, and I was like, wow. And I went back and I reread it again and again and again. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And, you know, I know that it is polarizing right now for me to even imply that some of the sacred cows in our scientific society are anything less than perfectly correct. But please, please, I beg you, as you go throughout your life, just keep this little passage from Crichton, this little nugget of wisdom in the back of your mind somewhere, and just try not to take it all so seriously. Try not to become so enamored with the theories that you're willing to forego living your life in the moment. Don't be so attached to what is trendy now and what is hot right now and what is science right now, because science is an ever-changing field. That's actually one of the strengths and beauties of science, is that we're constantly learning and updating, and to be so attached to one theory it's the most unscientific thing that you can do, right? That's not science. It's the opposite of science. So just keep your mind open to new and changing data and new and changing theories. But most importantly, keep your eye on the ball. Keep yourself in the moment. Feel the sea moving underneath your boat. Smell the salt in the air around you. Sense the people who are close to you. Be with them. Be with them in the real world. Don't let the hot new theories drive a wedge between you and living your human life, because there's just so much that we don't know and can't know. And it's not worth fighting over when there is so much to enjoy about life. Life really is a gift. And I leave that with you guys. And I hope that it is beneficial to you. It certainly has been to me. And with that, I think we're done with episode 1 of the new podcast. If you liked it, thank you so much for checking it out. If you didn't like it, I'm sorry. I'd be interested in some feedback, anything that I can do to improve it. But if you did like it, please share it. Please pass it along to somebody else who you think could get a kick out of it or some use out of it. I am, like I said, going to be reviewing a lot more non-standard fare going forward. And it would be, I hope, very useful to you to be able to kind of get just a bite-sized, deep dive into these books that I'm reading, so you can know whether you want to pick them up for yourself or not. And then, I'll share some news and something random and something else that I learned, and hopefully it'll be wonderful and fun and entertaining. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening. Have a good day.